morning, everyone. For the P3 committee meeting, Monday, December 6th, 2021, 10 a.m. from the Vallecitos Water District Boardroom. I'm calling the meeting to order. It looks like we do not have any members of the audience. Do we have any public comment? General Manager Purim, that was sent in.
We did not receive any public comments via email.
Okay. Okay, well, let's move on to item number 1, personnel. Oh, it looks like we actually don't have any items for discussion under personnel, so we'll move on to item number 2, public awareness, old business, update on the Vallecitos Water District Scholarship Program.
I think Chris is going to take that item.
Great. Hi, Chris.
Good morning. So I'm working remotely, so I passed along some information to the 2 committee members with a lot of questions for you to both respond to. How many scholarships do we want to give? There's like 4 San Marcos Unified School District high schools. We could also offer them to colleges and junior colleges. Do we want to send the checks directly to the student? Do we want to send them to the school? Do we want to have some sort of a standard that they need to complete the class with a grade or better? And I hope you both received it. And if you can send me back info, I can consolidate that into some comments, and then we can bring it also to the fuller board. I also sent along information on the costs for both Palomar per unit cost, and then basically Cal State San Marcos had a value that they considered basically a full-time student. So those were available for both of you to look at as well.
Yes, I see that. I have it in front of me. Thank you for doing that legwork. It's really helpful. I think just in the interest of time, maybe Director Pennock and I can go back and forth on these questions and sort of specify our preferences. Are you okay doing that?
I did. Did you get my response, Chris? I did respond to these questions already.
I did get them, yes, but I'm not sure. Well, typically when I email board members, I blind copy you, so I don't think Director Boyd Hodgson got your comment back.
That's correct. Yeah, I think because
okay, no,
I'm
good going.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
finalizing right now.
Okay. Okay. Well, I haven't had a chance to respond to these, so let me put a little bit of thought into it, and then we can go back and forth on email. I appreciate that, Grace.
I thought we were going to do it right now.
You want to do it right now?
No, I'm good.
We can.
I mean, it's not. I don't think it'll take too long.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe you can start with what
I thought.
your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I just thought. What did I say on my? I could pull up that sent email. But I thought just 1 per school. It depends. My whole question was, it depends on how much we can allocate, right? How much money do we have?
I think we would have to decide on that because it's not in the budget for this year, right?
Correct. We do not have a budgeted line item.
don't.
It's whatever the board wants to do. So that is obviously a critical piece. How much money is it?
Well, it was all the answers to the questions below were prefaced on, well, I mean, we talking about 10,000, we talking about 5, I mean, depends on how much we have that we want to, earmark. But I can go down quickly and just tell you how I responded.
Tell me your thoughts. I'd
And then we
appreciate
can-
that.
So I was just thinking 1 per school, and I think it was, the 4 high schools, as well as Cal State San Marcos, Palomar, and I think I said Maricosta. How much each student receiving a scholarship, should the scholarship be quarter? I just thought it was flat fee. I mean, regardless of the cost of tuition at each university, I just thought, 6 $1,000 scholarships, 6 $2,000 scholarships, something like that, just flat. At least this is a starting point, not that what will the selection process? Yeah, I said essay, application, letters of recommendation, all the above, would sound good. Yes, tuition, I thought, should be just paid to the recipient. We can trust them if they've filled out an application. Hopefully we're going to choose somebody that's not going to take the money and run out to a casino or something. But I thought it's okay to make the check payable to the recipient and then have kind of a return and report. I think also what I did is on that application, essay, application, letters of recommendation, as well as a financial analysis, so it makes the student, talk about how much school is going to cost, their housing, their books, their tuition, and almost do like not a financial needs, but just kind of a financial worksheet, so They're just not, throwing it out there, but they've done their legwork.
So let me, if I may, pause real quick. Are you asking them to try to demonstrate their need, or are you trying to ask them to demonstrate how they will spend the money that they receive?
Neither, just asking them to do the legwork to find out how much it costs to go to college.
Okay, gotcha.
So not like, hey, my family's poor, we need the money, or, I want so much to go to books or tuition or anything. Just, I've looked at it, this is how much my housing, my school, tuition, my books is going to cost,
Gotcha.
period.
Okay,
At least, that's my recommendation. Scholarship paid, yeah, to the student, but then again, have not a reimbursement, not to the college, and then just a return report. We gave you $1,000, and then they return, hey, 500 of that went towards books, 400 went for a down payment on it, whatever, just a kind of a return. Requirement for student to complete classes, passing grade. I said no on that. I guess I'm just assuming they're gonna do the best they can.
if I can add to that, so we have a tuition reimbursement program for our employees, and I would suggest that it mirror that, so as a baseline, and we do require that they complete the class and have a passing grade.
Oh, good. So if there's already, there's no
Yeah.
reason to, if you've got a program already for reimbursement in staff, I like that. Yeah, just follow that. That would be a good,
Yeah, so
good starting point right there. I didn't know what you currently had.
Yeah, so maybe what we can do, and Chris is still listening, maybe we can put together, so it's nice to hear your thoughts, and maybe we can also send out something to the two of the committee members to say, here's how we recommend based on existing kind of parallel programs, similar programs.
Perfect. I agree with that.
It may help.
Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, the purpose is, yes, one, to help them, but two, to generate some type of interest, right, in the water industry.
Yeah.
And so if that's currently what's happening in the water industry within a district,
Yeah.
then they should be able to comply with what's currently,
So there's a bit of a fundamental difference whether you're giving them the money up front or if it's on a reimbursement basis. So our tuition reimbursement is primarily it's a reimbursement. The employee has to take the risk, whatever you want to say, he has to front the money, and she has to complete the class, and then they can get reimbursed, as opposed to, do we want to just say, hey, here's $1,000, good luck, hope you follow through on it. And so that's the kind of guidance we're looking for.
right.
I like the idea of giving them the money up front.
Upfront.
Just because it will enable them to go, rather than if they have to front the money. That's a lot of money, so
You're right, it could be a barrier.
I prefer that. What do you
Okay.
think?
Yeah, and I think that's the whole definition of a scholarship. Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Here's whatever amount it is here, and it also puts the burden on them to show some responsibility. I mean, if they come back and say, I didn't complete anything, I didn't get a passing grade, and I don't really have any receipts on, a return report on how I spent the money, thanks, we gave it a best shot, but, it doesn't look like we're good for you, you're good for us, and good luck in your life. If they come back, and that's what'll be neat, to see some of them come back and say, hey, here's some receipts, this is how much, an accounting of where that scholarship that we fronted them went. Then it's just kind of the cream of rice to the top, and it'll be neat to see these students, and how they take responsibility with that money that they were given in a scholarship form, and it's exactly that, it is a gift. It is a gift based on their qualifications, on their application, essay, whatever it is, and say, here you go, what are you gonna do with this gift? And it'll be great to see.
I really like to see them get the recognition upon the presentation of the scholarship money at a board meeting, but then I'd also like to have them come back to the board.
Yeah, exactly.
And do, a presentation about, how their year has gone, or, what they've learned and how they were able to apply it, like you said, show the receipts. I like all of these ideas. The question that I have, we've worked with Jacob Sheba's group at Palomar. Do we want to restrict the money to be given to someone that's going to study in a program that increases the chances that they would come to work at a place like Vallecitos, or is it just generally for environmental science, or is it just generally to go and study at a college? Do we want to restrict the money that we, when they apply for the scholarship, must they be applicants also for a related field in water or the water industry?
I mean, I don't know, it seems like we could put it out there, it's based on the application. Those that are applying for water industry and are interested in that, their odds of getting the scholarship are just gonna be higher. But if we don't get any, and we get three applications, and one is in math, and one's in English, and one's in music, then I think we just kind of choose the best. I don't know if we have to
Okay.
restrict it to, but it just seems like those that are, based on their application. And if it's their application, and again, there is kind of leaning towards the water industry, they're going to have a better chance to receive a scholarship.
So we could specify something like, preference will be given for water-related field or work.
Something like that. I mean, and hopefully they understand, if they're applying for a scholarship with a gift from a water district, I don't know, some coaching might be, but hopefully that's implied.
Yeah, two thoughts on that. One is going again to our experience with our similar programs. When we have tuition reimbursement, it's for employees who are trying to further their career here. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the spot that they're in. So for example, we have somebody in customer service that wants to get into geographical information systems. So they're doing an internship in GIS, they're studying at Palomar, and that we encourage that. It's not furthering their career in customer service, but it's hopefully ultimately going to help Vallecitos. And I would recommend we do the same thing here, that it be an emphasis and something that we can see reasonably relatable to what we do. And the other thing I would add is we do have to be careful that we don't get accused of gift of public funds. It's a lot easier to put money, public money, ratepayer money towards something that we can see a foreseeable return on investment, as opposed to like a music program. We are so unrelated to the music field that I can't see how somebody getting education in music would benefit the district, whereas if they went to some kind of field that's related to the water industry, it's a lot easier to stand up to that criticism that we may receive. So just for your consideration.
Although it would be nice to have music throughout the halls here. I mean, it could generate.
Okay.
You could find a way, but I understand what you're saying.
So how would so what kind of language would be associated with that, do you think, in order to ensure that we are, increase our chances of getting a return on investment?
Yeah, I would say something like in the water and wastewater or related field. And that leaves a
Okay.
pretty broad opening. If somebody says, hey, I want to get in business, I want a business degree. Oh, that's related, we have a finance department. No, I can see that. But if somebody says music or, physical education, it's like, I don't see the connection. So
Okay.
I wouldn't want to be overly specific where it has to be a water or wastewater class, but I don't want it to be too broad either. So I think, or a related field, that gives us the flexibility to say, we don't think that's really related, and we can reject the application or not accept that, scholarship request.
I like that. I think that enables us to be it gives us the flexibility that we would need, but also enables us to focus on what we're, hoping to do with this, and that is develop young people to have a career that, maybe they'll come to work at Vallecitos, maybe not, maybe they'll go somewhere else, but bring young people into the water industry. Okay. So I think the sort of the line in the sand is we need to think about the money. And I do like the idea of giving a flat fee, and, in some places it'll go farther than others, of course, but it's helpful, it's money that they didn't have before. So for the sake of simplistic administration, I think, having it be a flat fee I'm fine with that. I have a question about this. Twin Oaks and Foothills, those are two separate high schools? Is that right, Chris?
So I think Twin
Yeah.
Oaks, yeah.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. They show up as separate high school at different locations.
Okay, all right.
I think Twin Oaks is the high school, and I think Foothills might be the adult education side.
So Foothills is also a high school. It's an online alternative high school. I just wasn't sure if they were separate.
I know the location's the same, I believe, right off of Casoo over there.
We can ask.
Yeah.
We can find out. And if that's the case, then yes, then there's Mission, San Marcos, Twin Oaks, and Foothills. There's 4.
And then I think High Tech High was the other one.
High Tech High, I'm okay with that. I mean, that's High Tech High is a school that serves our community. And then you said CSUSM, Palomar, and Miracosta.
I think so.
So that would be 7, right? 7 schools. Or is that, wait, no, that's 8. 8 schools. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 schools.
7, 8.
So what do we think? Do we want to do $2,000 each? That's $16,000. Is that a reasonable add to the budget?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a reasonable add. I don't know that, so if you're going to a community college, is the need as great as going to a four-year college? Chris included some of the cost information, I think it's at the dais in front of you as well. Palomar College is $46 per unit, so a 3-unit class is $138. Over the course of a year, would a student at Palomar College incur costs in excess of $2,000? I don't know. But we could say not to exceed up to $2,000. We'll cover the costs up to $2,000. So if somebody took partial course load at Palomar and only spent, $1,200, would it be reasonable to give them $2,000? And that's where I think we may get accused of gift of public funds if you're actually giving them more than it costs them to
If
take
they're
the
part-time,
classes.
46 times 15 units, 138, what'd you say it was, okay, so 46 times 15 that we're doing. 46 times.
But that's just the cost of the class. It's not books, it's not,
Right.
So that's 700.
yeah. It's,
So the devil's always in the details in these things.
Sure.
It's a little easier on the reimbursement side, because then somebody can say, hey, here's what it actually cost. And the scholarship, I love the idea because it helps people that otherwise may not be able to afford to go in the first place. You just want to make sure that the money's going where it's supposed to go. Staff can work out some of these. We can come up with some recommendations. It'd be helpful if the committee members can give us a general idea of what you're thinking, and then we can write the wording that will support it in a way that protects the district as well as helps the students.
okay, thank you for that. I think we're aligned. I'm okay with all of these suggestions. Thank you for putting the thought into it. I really appreciate that. I want to enable people to go and get an education that maybe are struggling or would not be able to otherwise. And it sounds like, this would be a really nice sum of money for, especially for folks going to community college.
So one thing we did not put on this list is the recurring nature of it. Is this a one-and-done scholarship, or is this something that a particular student could get on a repeating basis every year? Let's say they're a Cal State San Marcos student, they get $2,000 scholarship for the first year. They come back and report to the board how well they did. Would they be eligible, ineligible, automatic for the next year? That would be helpful to get some feedback on that as well. Or do you want to expand the pool and pick a new student that the money, that $2,000 could go to? Because I assume this is not just a one-year program we're talking about. This is going to be something that's going to be an annual budget item.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard question because we want to reward folks that are doing well and that are, that have shown themselves to do well. But I also want to enable as many people as possible.
Well, I think that's why I would say eligible.
So-
Not automatic, but eligible to reapply.
Yeah, they
and
can
so-
reapply
eligible.
and,
So not ineligible either, so,
Right.
come back and reapply each year, as far as the application, the committee who chooses the recipients, I would guess they would tend towards, if it's an applicant that's reapplying and he's already kind of he's doing good and he's going towards the water management side,
Yep.
he might have a heads up on somebody, so he's eligible, but we're not excluding any other new applicants either. So I would say eligible to put
Okay.
under that umbrella.
Okay.
I like that approach as well. Or, we could offer sort of another tier of, sort of like almost like a continuing, maybe the first time that someone wins the scholarship, it's X amount, and then if they reapply because they're doing well, we want them to continue their studies. So maybe
Incentivize that,
it's a slightly different amount. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, then I think that would be good, and then on a reimbursement basis, because then they're already in, and then say, okay, if you're doing well, then you could follow the, the industry standard where we, where you would be based on a reimbursement basis. It wouldn't be a flat scholarship fee, but up to a certain amount. Now that
Yeah.
you're kind of in, we've helped you get your foot in the door, up to $1,000 on reimbursement basis. Thereafter could be that tier.
And in that case, what we would do as, I think, a committee and a board is that we would, approve a chunk of money that exceeds, the initial outlay of, let's say we said, 8 times $2,000 scholarships. We would approve an amount that's more than that so that, if somebody comes up and says, oh, I need, I want to apply again, and as it turns out, I need $564, then we can, then that money's already there. So we would just have to approve a little bit more than what the initial outlay would be. It's also the case, it depends on how many folks apply. We could get very few applicants,
Yeah, exactly.
but I like your idea. I think your point about the reimbursement is a good one
On the second year.
on the second go-around.
Yeah. So maybe if I can add to that. So this is ultimately going to have to go back to the board, right? So I think there's probably at least 3 things we'd want from the board. One is, general approval of the concept, but 3 specifics. One is a dollar amount. So you had mentioned like 16,000. I would suggest maybe a little bit more. 2 is we'd need some kind of criteria, what eligibility, which high schools, which colleges to go to. And the last is some kind of a process. And I don't think we need to lock it in at the beginning. So the process may be Vallecitos is going to establish a selection committee. In that selection committee, every year, there's a period of time where you're accepting applications. The selection committee reviews and approves and maybe makes a recommendation to the board. But it's not specific. You may have a year where no one applies or only one person applies, and does that person get $16,000? No. I think the committee could say, hey, we only got one applicant. We're going to give you maybe a little bit more than the 2,000 we would envision, but there's some flexibility within the process, and that's what I would recommend. And again, I can work with Chris to come up with this process that would be to figure it all out later. It's really hard to figure all this stuff out up front. It's nice to have general guidelines and criteria and commit to a certain process, and within that process, there's a committee that has kind of broad discretionary powers within it. So I would suggest the most important thing to me is a number, and I would suggest maybe like $25,000. Maybe some of that is for new applicants and a reserve pool for recurring people. You want to continue to encourage their ongoing, but something like that I think would be doable.
Agreed.
And we can maybe, I could work with Chris and we can come back at the next committee meeting and fine tune this a little bit. We're getting clearer with the more feedback we get, and that's a good thing. And I don't know if we have a specific target date of when we want to have this established. It'd clearly be good to have it ready for the fall semester, so that everything's in place for when people are getting ready to go to a fall semester. And I don't know when they have to start enrolling and getting money, but I think we're probably a couple of months away from finalizing this and taking it to the board, just because we meet once a month.
What would we need to do as far as the approved budget, though, since this is, an additional expense that did not go into the budget that we approved?
Yeah, we typically have enough variance in the budget that we could absorb this impact within the currently approved budget. In subsequent years, I would recommend that it be a line item.
Gotcha,
So,
okay.
and sometimes it's tough, we don't want to wait till July 1st, because some students may say, hey, I need to know by March or April. I think we can meet that need within the current budget, and with the board's approval, of course, and then subsequent years would be a budgeted line item.
Okay, thank you. I think we've
we're
crystallized
close,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
The only, on that one topic you said, I would like it almost like an extension as to the current reimbursement basis. Like you're saying, if we only have 3 applicants, we have $25,000 set aside and only 3 applicants applied, so there's 12,000. What do we do with the other 13? I don't know how the current budget works for the reimbursement basis for in-house, but maybe this can be an extension of that, where if we don't utilize all the scholarship funds, it can go into into the current one where it's an extension of the reimbursement basis for current employees.
Yeah, there's different ways to do it, and there's certain line items in the budget that roll forward at the end of the fiscal year and some don't. So if you had, for example, if we had $25,000 budgeted, we only awarded $6,000, then we've got this extra $19,000. The board could probably make a decision whether does that get added to next year's $25,000, or does the slate get wiped clean and we have $25,000 to allocate next year? Wes is paying attention diligently here. I don't know if he has anything he wants to add regarding the nature of the budgetary. Wes, is there anything you wanted to add?
Well, just in that case, it's an expense, so it wouldn't really be rolled forward. If if we didn't spend it all this year, the board could elect to say next year we want to increase it because we didn't spend the entire amount this year. Each year, we kind of reset the clock on the expenses. So as we set them next year, we would just say it's going to be, say we didn't spend $6,000, the budget this year, if the board chooses, would be $6,000 higher.
I'm okay with that, and it also gives us the flexibility of if, let's say we have an overwhelming number of applicants, then, we can plan for that. We can add more.
You can get like eight $2,000 scholarships and six $7,000 or $1,000 ones or something.
Yeah, and I think that flexibility is the key, and that's why you don't want to lock yourself in right now, but you want to be able to envision maybe you only have one applicant or versus you have 21 applicants, and you want to be able to be flexible.
I do agree that they must complete the class and receive a passing grade. I'm okay with that. And I think number 7, we've already sort of answered. So are we okay? Do you have enough guidance from us?
Yeah, just one clarification. So if it's an upfront scholarship, we're giving you $1,000 and they don't complete the class, I would say that's criteria that makes them ineligible to apply for the next year, okay? We may not be able to get the money back from them. We gave them $1,000. It was a failed experiment with that particular individual, but don't come asking next year for more.
Yep.
So.
Yeah,
to me, that's a
I'm okay with that.
reasonable-
I think going after the money is unnecessarily punitive.
Right.
Because, things happen, and sometimes it's not a reflection of necessarily anyone's character. It just is not the right time,
Yeah.
so.
But as my
Okay.
mom always said, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
Well,
Agreed.
I think that just, that forfeits their eligibility to
For
apply
future.
the
Okay.
next year. I think that's reasonable. Yeah, okay.
So, Director Boyd Hodgson, you asked a good question. Do we have enough information? I'm going to ask Chris if he thinks he got enough information out of this to bring it back next month.
I believe so. I would like to see if Director Boyd Hodgson would like to respond to those questions, then I can consolidate the two. But sort of what I heard was she was in agreement with most of what Director Pennock had put. So either thumbs up to Director Pennock's or just send me separate responses is fine.
Thumbs up. I wrote down as Director Pennock was speaking, and thumbs up. I don't know about the logistics of administrating a check directly to the student, but I presume that's something that we can manage.
Yeah, look, Wes, I assume that's something we can do?
Sorry, writing a check directly to the student, I'm not sure I heard that part.
Yeah, so there's a couple of options. If we're going to provide a scholarship, we could either pay the student directly or we could pay the university where they're attending schools. Is there a problem with either one of those approaches?
I don't think there is. We'd probably prefer to pay the university, but as long as we have the appropriate documentation, I think we can write a check to the student.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. I would second everything that Director Pennock said, and I do like his addition of Mira Costa. And as long as, if we can get the answer to whether Twin Oaks and Foothills are separate or combined, just sort of knowing that information would be great. So we're looking at either 7 or 8 schools.
I'm trying to remember the name of the school that has the good water program down in South County. Do you remember the name of it, Chris?
Is it Cuyamaca?
Cuyamaca?
Cuyamaca, yeah, that's definitely one we would want to have on the list of eligible
Okay.
destination schools. So they probably have a better water and wastewater program than Palomar at the current time. So if somebody wants to go there instead, I think that would be a good eligible school.
Okay, so does that bring the total to 8 or 9?
Yeah,
then?
so I don't want to mix them. So one are kind of origination schools, the high school you went to, which students are eligible, and then the destination schools, where do they want to go? So there's like two lists. These, if you go to one of these high schools, you're eligible, and if you want to go to one of these colleges, you're also eligible. But I don't know that if they're additive in terms of numbers. It's like two separate lists. I think we
Right.
have like 5 on one list and probably 4 destination schools.
Right,
So
okay.
We'll clarify that when we come.
Okay. Well, great work, everyone. This is really exciting, and thank you for putting so much thought into your responses. I appreciate that. Okay, so are we set to move on to the next item then?
We are, and Chris, thank you.
Okay. Update on another exciting school-related program on the Bill Dean program.
Yeah, so we're moving forward with that. I've met with Bill several times. The agreement is signed. He's shortlisting the number of schools. He's looking at schools, classrooms, and teachers who will help us with this program. What he's hearing is that this, the water unit in 5th grade, which is the target audience, is at the latter part of the year. So it's not until like April or May. So he's not ready to do it yet because the teachers, that's not when and they have this curriculum that they have to follow, right? So they can't accelerate it even if they wanted to. So Bill knows that we're looking at the April-May timeframe, so we've got a little bit of time, but as we get closer, as the teacher and classroom and school are selected and we have a better idea of the timeframe, we'll update the committee.
And what are the schools that are being considered?
So he's looking at La Costa Meadows, I believe he's looking at San Alejo Hills, what's this new school?
Oh, Double Peak.
Double Peak.
Oh, good.
And I think there's a 3rd school he's looking at. So he's meeting with the school district too to see if they have any recommendations. I don't know if they have specialty programs at any of their schools or not, but those
Okay.
are the 2 schools that Bill and I have discussed.
Okay. If it's possible to consider another school, I know La Mirada Academy
Okay?
might be very welcoming to the opportunity as well.
Okay, I'll mention that to Bill.
And the program cost on this, have we set aside, funds?
Yeah, it was, I believe it was budgeted, well, it's paid for regardless. Wes can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was around $25,000 for Bill to do this program for us.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else on that?
Nope.
Okay, thank you for that update.
welcome.
That's great news. It sounds like it's moving forward, and some 5th graders are going to get a very specialized and intensive program on water. That's wonderful. Okay, number 3, policy old business, update on the single-use plastics resolution.
Yeah, I think Chris was going to take that item.
Thank you, General Manager Prim. So I did some research with Maggie in the warehouse, and I'm gonna see if I can share my screen. I'm kind of working from home, but also trying not to use the network. It's just gonna show my network connection. That really won't work. Okay, well, never mind. What we found out was that we typically buy the plasticware for staff to use at Costco. We typically buy more forks than we do spoons, and we buy more spoons than we do knives. And the cost for the plastic forks for 10 boxes of 500 is $134.90, so they're like $13.49 for a box of 500. So keep that tucked in your memory banks. The compostable ones through Costco come in a box of 1,000. So they cost $53.99. So essentially, the compostable is probably double the cost of plastic. But in doing all the math, it really only adds up to about $270 more per year, which in the scheme of things really isn't a whole heck of a lot of money in the scheme of things. Yeah, it's double, but it's $270. The one little comment I need to throw in is In researching this, the compostable, I don't think it's quite as compostable as everybody thinks it is. It's not like you could probably do it compost in your backyard. It's more of like industrial compost, but it's still probably a better option than plastic. Before I move on to bottled water, were there any questions on those compostable spoons versus plastic spoons and forks and utensils?
Can it go in the green bin, the Edco green bin, the compostable? Is that,
I think they could go in the Edco green bin. I just don't think they're gonna work out in your backyard. You know, it takes more effort than that.
I would add
So I
real
will-
quickly, we don't, so internally, we have, in each person's office, we have a trash can and a regular recycled. We don't have a compost or green waste. So collecting it from the end user, which is the employee, to get it diverted from the waste stream may be the challenge. So it's-
okay, but it can go in the recycling.
I believe so.
And so on the bottled water, let me get back to my document. The bottled water, the boxed water that we get for the board, it totals $183, 12 packs at $21.29 each. So it's not a whole heck of a lot of more for the boxed water for the board meetings. The analysis shows it's about $90 more per year. So again, not a massive dollar amount. The boxed water shelf life is really 18 months and bottled water is 24 months. So, you know, there's a longer shelf life to the bottled water, but you know, that can just be rotated as needed. So I don't think that's a deal breaker either. I think the recommendation based on what I was able to find out was, yeah, this is something we could certainly do without a big financial impact. Wes is on the line and maybe he wants to chime in, but I just didn't see the dollar value really giving the district too much heartburn.
I agree with you on that, Chris. I don't think it'll be too much of an impact.
And Chris, plastic cups, I know in the boardroom, we no longer put out plastic cups. We put out the, I don't know, paper or cardboard cups. I assume we would do that district-wide, not just at board meetings. We would no longer provide plastic cups for employees. Any ballpark estimate of cost impacts, or is it the same order of magnitude as the other two items?
It's really the same order of magnitude. I don't have the math on that one, but I looked at it and it's so similar. There's a little bit more cost to the paper product or the compostable product, but really not a whole heck of a lot.
So
Yes, I think we're prepared to get rid of the use of plastics, those single-use plastics, for at least for the things that Chris is talking about. So if the committee is supportive of that.
I'm supportive. What do you think?
I don't have a strong opinion either way.
Okay.
I really don't.
I mean, it sounds to me like for, relative pennies, we can make a change that is positive and also sets a good example for the district. So I'm definitely supportive of that. One of the other parts to this is adopting a resolution supportive of the resolution that passed with the San Marcos City Council. And I'm not sure that we have that resolution drafted. I know that I have not drafted it. But I think we'd also like to consider that as well. So when this comes before the board, what would it look like? Would it be, that we are going to make the switch from these other plastic products to more environmentally friendly products, and also we can indicate that we are supportive of the resolution that was passed with the city? Can we do that all in one, or does it need to be separate, or?
Yeah,
General Manager Pruitt, I think I could draft up
Yeah.
something like that.
yeah, I think I would suggest we take both items to the board under the same heading. One would be adopting a resolution of support for the City of San Marcos's ordinance, and the other would be maybe it's just an informational update on the practice we're gonna take on, or it could be a policy. And I guess I would maybe look for Chris's advice on whether we think that the elimination of the use of single-use plastics rises to the level of a policy at Vallecitos, or we're just going to change our purchasing practices?
Yeah, and I think having a resolution that basically states both, that, you know, that we're gonna support the city of San Marcos and we're gonna make, you know, purchasing changes to choose more environmentally friendly products. I think they go hand in hand. I think they can walk together and be in one resolution.
Do I need to send you the resolution from the city of San Marcos?
That would certainly be helpful, because then I can reference it appropriately.
Okay, it's got a lot of information in there that's not appropriate for Vallecitos, obviously because they're a different body of government, but I can do that. I will make a note to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for that background research, excuse me, and doing that legwork. I think, you know, I think it's one of those small things that makes a difference. It adds up. It makes a difference. It shows that we're leading by example, and it's time to do that. So thank you for doing that legwork, and I look forward to, you know, to implementing it and seeing the resolution and having it come before the board. I will send you what was passed at the City of San Marcos, and you can take from that whatever you think is appropriate. Okay, any other discussion or thoughts on that particular item? No? Okay. Okay, moving on. New business, prioritization of ordinances, resolutions, policies, review. And we have a list that was put together.
Yeah, maybe I can give a little bit of background, and then I can refer to that list.
Yeah.
So subsequent to our strategic plan, there's been some conversations about updating ordinances, policies, resolutions, and the like. So staff developed a list of ones that, it's a combination of sources, but it's a list of ordinances, policies, resolutions, and practices that we've either heard from the directors that there needs to be some work, or it's issues that staff has encountered that we think it's worth the board's consideration. So how I see this working is we have a list, and I think there's 14 on this list. We can give you a real brief description of what they are, and trying to get the committee's feedback to maybe narrow this list down to maybe a half a dozen or so that we could take to the board. And then the board can further mull that over and maybe select a couple to focus on. Now, you may remember in my performance evaluation, that was an item that was recommended that we take 2 to 3 ordinances, policies, resolutions per year and move them forward. Nothing magic about that number, but that was what was included in the feedback on the evaluation. So if you'd like, I can go down this list and maybe give you a real brief explanation. We have some staff members on the line that can provide you greater detail if you want. I'm not looking to change the language at this meeting. I'm trying to just get a feedback from the committee members as to which half dozen or so would you like to take forward to the board with the recommendation that they be considered for the focus of the first 2 to 3 to actually act on. So
I like that idea. And when you do that, could you please also add which ones were recommended by staff so that we can make sure that we're, you know, we're considering that?
yeah, so I'm going to go, if it's okay with the committee, I'll go through each of these and give you a real brief description. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, or staff can hopefully answer them. And to your point, Director Boyd-Hodgson, I'll try to point out whether it was through feedback we got from the board members or if it was a staff item. So the first one is timing of capital facility fee payment. This is definitely an item we heard from the board members. Right now, our policy or ordinance changed. It used to be the developers paid further in advance of their development, and probably about 8 or so years ago, it was changed that they could pay a little bit later in the process. They still pay before the impacts of their development are felt on the system, but there was a change in the timing. So that's, if the board wanted, or if the committee thought that this was worth reconsidering, the timing of the payment of the capital facility fees. So I'll go on to the next item unless there's questions there. The next item is backflow device upgrades. We have an ordinance right now, and sometimes I'll use the word ordinance. I may be a little incorrect. It may be a policy, it may be a resolution, but generically we have rules in place, right? There's a rule in place that says, let me back up. A backflow device is something that prevents water from flowing from a end user's use back into the system, right? we don't know what they're doing on their side of the wall, so we don't want their, what could be tainted water to get back into the public system. Larger users of water have a device, it's called a backflow device. That's its sole purpose. It'll let water flow one way, won't let it flow the other. Older devices don't have the ability to be tested to make sure they're working properly, which puts our public water system at risk. So we updated the ordinance to say older units have to be upgraded to this newer double check system, which allows them to be tested on an annual basis. And we do, by the way, we do have a program that backflow devices get tested annually if they're testable. We own some, the district owns some of the backflow devices, more legacy stuff. Most of them are owned by the customer of record, and it's the customer's responsibility to make sure it gets tested, and they provide us with the test results. So if their device failed, or if they have an out of compliance, an older type backflow device that can't be tested, our ordinance says it has to be upgraded at their cost, if it's their device. So the reason it's on here is it becomes somewhat problematic. We'll tell a property owner, and this came up recently, we'll tell a property owner, hey, your backflow device is out of date. It's not, it doesn't meet current standards. It needs to be upgraded. And it could be a $30,000 to $50,000 item, even for a small backflow device. Larger backflow devices could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I think it's worth consideration because these are letters that staff generates and sends to a property owner and says, you got to do this and it's cost you $50,000. And often the next call they make is to a board member or come to a board meeting and say, hey, I just got this letter. So I think it's worth consideration. Are we okay with the current practice? From a public health perspective, it's the right one, but it raises some customer service issues. So that's item number 2. Any questions on that one? That's probably that's a staff, more of a staff initiated item. So does that raise any questions you'd like me to address?
Just, have we done this, how long have we been doing that, asking property owners to replace? Is that something fairly new?
Well, so James is here, he can maybe address that. We're not, it's not a new program, and we don't hit everyone that's out there, but when something comes to our attention, for example, if oftentimes we'll get a report from somebody who says, hey, I see this backflow device leaking in the parking lot, and then we'll go look into it, and we'll say, oh, that's an older device, then we'll contact the property owner to either fix it or upgrade it. So it's not a really proactive program, but in some cases we do. If a tenant is having tenant improvements, expanding their facility, then we'll make them upgraded as part of their tenant improvements. But with that, I'm going to see what else James may want to add.
And the district's never assisted in that financially?
No, we don't assist financially in that. We may assist
never
them
have.
with device or advice. I apologize. Say, hey, here's what you may want to consider. Here's the device you'd have to use. But beyond that, it's the ordinance is pretty clear. It's the property owner's responsibility. So James, did you want to add to that?
No, actually, Glenn, you covered it. It's basically a practice that we've been doing for a while. It's been more reactive. The TI process, the tenant improvement process, allows us to get ahead of it a little bit. We are also basically actively now compiling a list of what backflows are out there that are potential issues. One of the things I'd like to add is it's not only a good public safety policy to do so to protect the public system, it's also a Department of Health standard. So when the Department of Health changed its rules on the backflows and the type of backflows, the older legacy backflows that don't have the ability to be tested are no longer allowed. So that's why in the last 5 years or so, staff has been more proactive about going out and identifying these backflows. Prior to that, the older backflows were kind of grandfathered in, but the health department, the state health department has changed those rules, and it's been a little bit over 5 years.
How many are we talking, how many out-of-date backflow devices? And, you know, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how frequent this problem is and who it impacts.
Sure. So these are, I'm going to have Elizabeth talked about the actual number because I don't recall the number. I know we are recently gathering those numbers up, but they're almost entirely all commercial or industrial users. They don't impact residential typically. Some older residential subdivisions, not individual homes, but either condo or, kind of a larger complex may have an older backflow, but almost all the new ones that were put in the 80s or really the 90s and the 90s forward the standards are current as far as the type of backflows that are put in. Elizabeth, can you maybe hit on a couple of the other items, like the number of backflows? I know we had both, um, I guess, backflows that we have responsibility for and others that the customer's responsible for.
Yeah, we've been putting together a draft inventory list of the total number of backflows in our district, and there's 496 total. Remind you, these are preliminary numbers. But of the 496, 202 backflows are non-compliant, meaning they either can't be tested or, well, that they can't be tested or they don't meet current standards. And we estimate that of the 202 that are non-compliant, about 167 of them might be district responsibility to replace. And that would be based on changes in standards of when we updated our standards to clarify the responsibility, where the responsibility changes on the device. So 202 non-compliant in our district currently that we're aware of.
So if I understand you correctly, 496 total, 202 of that 496 are non-compliant, and it might be, of that 202, 167, it may be on the district to replace.
Yes. So that means roughly 35 of them would be responsibility of the customer.
Okay. I see Chris's hand raised.
Hey, good morning. I just wanted to clarify, in the district, we've got almost 6,000 backflow devices in total. That's on commercial, irrigation.
Chris, sorry to interrupt you, but can you please introduce yourself just so everyone knows who you are?
Sorry, guys. Chris Tapia, Meter Services Supervisor. I also oversee the backflow program. Recently obtained the Cross Connection Specialist certification and backflow certification.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So the 496 number we're kicking around, that is specific to fire services only. Like I was saying, in the district, we've got about 6,000 devices in total that service irrigation meters, commercial meters, domestic, anywhere where we deemed a hazard, a potential hazard on the premise, we enforce the installation of a backflow device. So these ones that are non-compliant are specific to fire service lines, dedicated fire service lines for the protection of the property. And the numbers that Elizabeth quoted are correct. In the district, total dedicated fire service lines, 496. And 202 of those, they're not testable.
So,
I just wanted to clarify, the number is specific to fire service lines.
so how does that square with what you said, General Manager Pruitt, about the public health risk? Is it I'm just trying to understand, if these are fire services only, do they also qualify as under the umbrella of, if there is a backflow, it could be sewage, for example, or?
Yeah, it certainly wouldn't be sewage, but the fire services, sometimes they have water standing in like standpipes for a long period of time, and it can be contaminated. And so if that water gets sucked back into the public water system, there is a public health risk. So the risk remains the same. It's not sewage, but it could contaminate the public water supply.
Okay, understood, thank you.
Correct. And I'll add to that, some of these devices were installed before the lead law changed. So the lead content in some of these single checks is above current standards. And every fire service system is unique based off of what the property is using. So some have chemical additives, foam or whatnot. If you have a grease fire, you don't want to add water to it. So these fire services have the potential to, whether it's under back siphonage or back pressure, to backflow some hazards into our system.
Chris, could I ask you to venture a guess? So with the numbers we heard before, there was about 35 privately owned, what we learned are fire service lines that may need to have upgraded backflows. But of the 6,000 total backflow devices, how many of those are privately owned and would need upgrading?
Those all should be compliant. Are the only batch of non-compliance that I've found so far are the fire service lines. When we find domestic or commercial ones that are out of compliance, it's usually that the property has changed occupants and the new occupant doesn't notify us of their intended use of the water. So if a building went from selling T-shirts to becoming a print shop, and they're like developing film in there or something, a photo lab, and they didn't notify us, we can't enforce them to install a backflow. But the rest of our domestic, commercial, that's all protected properly.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right, ready to go on to the next item?
yes.
Okay, so the item, third item is inactive account status. So in one of our ordinances, customers do have the ability, if they're gonna be away from their house for periods of time, to put their account in an inactive status, their water account. So instead of paying the regular ready-to-serve charge, and I don't remember what the current ready-to-serve charge is, $50 or so, but it would put them in a status where we would lock off their account and they'd only have to pay $12.50 per month. So it's just something, if the board's interested in revisiting that or allowing customers to continue to have that. It came up recently at a meeting when we were talking about bill pay though. So there is that inactive account status.
Okay,
So number 4, business of the board. This is what I always call the kitchen sink ordinance. It has a lot to do with president, vice president, committee assignments, board travel, board per diem compensation. There's a lot of issues dealing with just the overall, how the board operates. That's something that's been brought up in over the years, in the 5 years I've been here, that's probably the ordinance that we've talked about the most. And I still hear comments to this date that we probably need to revise or at least take a look at the business of the board. And I think it's ordinance 216 right now.
okay,
So number 5 is the reserve policy. Certainly something we heard from the board members. So the reserve policy basically lays out what our reserve levels should be. Operating reserves, capital reserves, whatever types of reserves. So if the committee thought that the board should take a look at the reserve policies, that's the direction we're looking for. So for example, within the reserve policy, it sets your floor and ceiling. Every time we go through budget projections, you always hear about the floor and the ceiling. That's where that's contained.
okay,
Number 6, bill payment arrangements. This is maybe tied up with the inactive account status, probably in the same ordinance, but it talks about the arrangements we will make with customers if they're having trouble paying their bill. Now, this isn't related to the arrearages program or anything like that. It's unrelated to COVID times, although COVID certainly kind of brings it to the forefront. But when people are having trouble making payments, do we want to talk about how we treat those customers? And I can tell you, we bend over backwards. We probably go over and above what's included in our ordinances and policies, but it's something for the board's consideration. We always try to work with our customers to make sure that we can reach a payment plan that's affordable to them and still there's a foreseeable chance that we'll receive payment for all the services we provided.
okay,
Okay, item number 7 is the travel policy. That's contained within, this is more geared towards employee travel, but there's board travel issues too. So for example, if a board member or a staff member wanted to go to a conference, oftentimes the conference has early registration fees. They have a number of hotel rooms set aside at a preferred rate. And if we wait too long, all those costs go up. So the ordinance or whatever kind of travel policy you have is a good place to try to control those. And what if somebody signs up too late? Is the cost on the district? Is the cost on the individual, whether it be a board member or a staff member? We do have a lot of travel issues that arise, and my recommendation, whether it's the first 2 or 3 we go through, but it would be worth taking a look at the travel policy again. Purchasing policies, the next item, that's kind of a broad item that we want to talk about, how we purchase things, how we procure things. It could be a big picture, like recently we talked about our legal services, that with every 5 years you should go through a competitive process. That could be on the bigger ticket item for purchasing policy. It could be should we buy local? Should there be preference for local service, either service providers or products that we buy? And it could be as simple as, we don't want to buy plastic cups and plastic silver anymore. So it's a pretty broad thing, but the purchasing policy, we spend a lot of money purchasing things. Next item is the board orientation handbook. So we do have a board orientation handbook, it's just out of date. So obviously in COVID, it was a little bit more difficult to orient our 2 new board members, but we probably need to take a look at that handbook and bring it up to a current status. We have an election, just right around the corner, really, less than a year away. And if we were to get a new board member at that time, it'd be good to have that handbook updated. I'm going to need a little help with these last 5 items, because I think all of these were recommended by engineering, but I can introduce them. The first is a fire service discharge to sewer. So James, if you want to handle that item.
Sure. Our ordinance currently it's one of our older ordinances, I think a number maybe 65. And back then, the fire service and any discharged water that's, again, kind of back to the original subject, when that water passes that backflow and sits in the fire service, it's no longer considered drinking water. So when you discharge it, flush a system, it used to go into the storm drain. But with all the different rules now, that have changed since the inception of Ordinance 65, and I don't recall the date of that, but I know it's one of our older ordinances. You could no longer discharge water, such as fire service water, or really any type of water, into the storm drain without special permits or going through the city's MS4 process. So we're looking at different things, especially this came to light with the new Costco that's going in where Fry's was. And their property, and also some of the new development that's going in the university district area, where they're going to have large fire pumps, and they need a way to discharge that water in case of emergency. Going into the sewer, is commonly used and accepted by many agencies with conditions, obviously, so it doesn't hurt our system. So we're looking at Ordinance 65, which is the ordinance in question, and actually updating that to kind of meet the current environmental rules that are in place that are different from when it was originally incepted.
Is there opportunity in that ordinance to include instructions or mandates to capture the water through pervious surfaces or rain gardens or something like that?
It wouldn't be that. The city's MS4 permit kind of allows for some of those things. But a lot of times the waters that they're discharging into the sewer, the city does not want any of that water to go back into the ground or enter make its way into the storm drain to an existing stream or creek.
But that's where we're dumping it right now, right?
No.
Did I misunderstand?
It's currently not being dumped. And what they're trying to do is to get it away so this water could go into the sewer so we could actually treat it and make
Okay.
it, in our case, make recycled water.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, James. So the next item is titled Water Sewer Lease Capacity. It's kind of a complicated issue. So when a customer comes in and they purchase a meter, or let's say they build a business, we calculate how much demands that we think that they'll place on the water system and how much demands they'll place on the wastewater system. And when they pay their capital facility fee up front, that's supposed to pay for the impacts they're going to have on the system. Oftentimes we find that users over time, their demands are far greater than what they paid for. So a good example is a small business may have started as a warehouse and they were only charged for like one equivalent dwelling unit for sewer. Then maybe they had one bathroom in the warehouse. And all of a sudden, over time, it's now a brewery. So they're really putting a huge demand on the wastewater system in that example. So we have mechanisms in place that allow people to exceed their capacity, but there's a cost associated with it. I think we have a water surcharge program that they can use more than their water capacity, and we have a sewer lease program, so they can basically lease capacity in the system if they're exceeding their purchased capacity. these numbers get huge. So the example I gave of a warehouse converting to a brewery is a real example. It happened, it's in the San Marcos Business Park. And this property owner, when we brought it to their attention, in order for them to purchase the proper amount of capacity based on their current use, it was almost $500,000 of extra capacity. So that's clearly a big number for a relatively small business. And these items are very controversial. They certainly get the attention of the property owner. And right now, our ordinances are like direction to staff how to do this. So when we follow through on that, it often circles around and you'll get board involvement. So I think it's worth getting a discussion about these programs. We could be very bureaucratic and say, no, you have to purchase your capacity, or there's other ways. And I think these lease and surcharge programs are good programs, but we only put people on the lease and surcharge programs when we're aware of it. So I think in order to really be comprehensive, we need to do a detailed analysis of all the accounts and see how their usage is lining up with their purchased capacity. But that can then identify hundreds, if not a couple of thousand customers that are using more than they paid for on the capacity side of things. We often think of these capital facility fees for new development, but this issue is really for existing customers, that they're just using more than they purchased for. So at the time, they may have been charged appropriately, but over time, without our knowledge, something changed within the walls of the building, and we don't know what they do. But when it comes to our attention, then we try to be proactive, because otherwise they're getting a free ride on the system that they didn't pay for. We do have a much better relationship, and thanks to James and his team for this, with the city of San Marcos, that we are now part of their what's called the tenant improvement process. So if a property owner wants to do some tenant improvements to their facility to change it from a warehouse to a brewery, the city now notifies us, and we're in that loop, so that we can identify the new impacts on the water and wastewater systems, and that's when some of these issues arise. It's better if it arises earlier, so a business owner can make an informed decision, do they want to make the change or not, as opposed to coming after the fact where they've been, the example I gave, and I won't give the name, but they've been operating for years, getting the benefit of our system without having paid for it, and now they're saying, well, we wouldn't have made all the investments in our business if we had known we would also have to pay for these improvements to the water and wastewater systems. So all of that is a long way of saying it's probably worth looking at the ordinances that cover these water and sewer lease capacities. Any questions on that one? It's relatively complicated. Okay. Reimbursement agreement policy, and again, I'll have James cover this one. This has to do with development usually, but James, go ahead.
So I'm going to actually punt this one to Elizabeth to talk about the reimbursement, because we're going through some different reimbursements currently, and it really regards to the structure of the reimbursement policy itself.
We do. We have a reimbursement agreement we're going through right now. And in that process, we noticed that the language for how much the customer gets reimbursed based on the agreement is based on the engineering news record cost index. That's a little bit of a concern, because there are years that the cost index, that index can stay at zero or even decrease in value. So our thought is that if the intent of the agreement is to reimburse a previous customer for, say, extending a sewer main, and other customers are connecting to it and have to reimburse that original owner, we thought basing that on the engineering news record cost index may not make the most sense, since that can go down over the course of time. So might want to consider maybe basing it on some other index or a standard inflation rate.
And to provide the committee with a little bit of background, so at times when a customer puts in an extension of a water or sewer facility, there may be other benefiting properties that didn't connect to it. So our policy, and staff believes is a good policy, allows that customer to get reimbursed if one of these other properties connect into that water or sewer facility that was built. So at the moment it was built, the customer incurred a cost. And that cost is borne by the customer, not by the district or its ratepayers. And then as a property connects to it, that cost is reimbursed. A prorated share is reimbursed appropriately based on either the amount of use, or usually it's frontage of the property. So this way, the original customer who built the property is reimbursed accordingly when everybody else connects in, and to make it fair. Our reimbursement policy allows it for 20 years, or to have to stay inactive as far as the active reimbursement area. And the difference is, if you consider, and I'm just making up numbers now, if you put in a $100,000 facility, it costs that customer $100,000. It currently being tied to the engineering news record. So like currently, the construction costs are well inflated. So it would inflate it to the new customer quite a bit. You know, if it goes up 20, 30%, their prorated share would go up 20, 30%. The original customer who installed it didn't incur that extra 20, 30%. Or vice versa, during the recession, construction costs went down almost 40%. So this original customer who put out $100,000 to build the pipe now is going to get reimbursed much less than his output during that. So it didn't make a lot of sense to us that it's tied to the engineering news record. If it was tied to more of a cost of living index, because those monies have already been incurred, that seemed to make more sense.
Okay.
Okay, and the next item is agriculture water. James, was that yours or was that Chris?
I believe that's Chris's.
All right, Chris, did you want to add to that one?
Well, I think that's,
Oh, it's a combination.
yeah, it's a combination. Basically, our agricultural customers need to be defined as commercial agricultural. And a lot of our customers are combined residential and agricultural. And I believe we have one ordinance that talks about agricultural customers, and then there's a separate engineering ordinance that talks about commercial customers possibly needing a separate meter. And so we have combined accounts. I believe both board members have helped talk to customers getting into the new program. And there's a lot of residential that it's a combined meter. It's residential, it's agricultural, and the language in the other ordinance talks about, well, a commercial property needs a separate meter. And so it's a little unclear how we would resolve those two items. And I think it's probably a good item for the board to review and look at and make some decisions on.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And Chris, thanks for jogging my memory on this one too. Currently, if to be part of the ag program, you have to have a commercial operation. And if you have a commercial operation, according to our other ordinances, you need a separate commercial or ag meter that's separate from your residential meter. So currently, we have people in the ag program that are getting the benefits of the ag program that have combined meters. And it basically, we have a discrepancy. We have one ordinance that says one thing and another ordinance that does another. So it's something that definitely would need to get cleaned up.
Okay, if there's no questions on that, the last item that we had for the committee's consideration is temporary off-site agreements. I'm going to give this to James or Elizabeth.
Sure, I'll start off, and I'm sure Elizabeth will add a little bit more to it. Many of these we brought to the engineering committee. We have temporary off-site agreements, which means that there's a property that doesn't have frontage on a water or sewer facility, a main in the road. So we allow them to connect up through what we call a temporary off-site. Our off-site agreements state that once water or sewers is available as far as frontage on your property, that the customer is obligated at his or her own expense to connect up to those facilities. As we're going through our system, we're finding more and more of these temporary off-sites as they're usually on the outskirts or in areas that are underdeveloped. And what's happening now is as more people are developing these harder to develop properties, they're extending water mains, or there's a water or sewer main that has been extended, and there's existing temporaries that are now coming due. So staff, following policies, is in the process of sending out letters to these customers. Many times it's not the original customer, to let them know that they have physical work that needs to, and costs that they need to incur to connect their either water, sewer, or both to the public system within the street. Obviously, this is a surprise to a lot of the customers, since some of these temporaries may have been in place for decades. Elizabeth, would you like to add anything else to it?
Yeah, I'll just add that sometimes when we come across a property or an owner that has these type of agreements and there's a project installing a new main along their frontage, per the agreement, they have to reconnect their service to the new main. So we've been reaching out to these customers with a letter and explaining that to them. And sometimes we just don't hear back, or you know, sometimes really the owner's just unaware that this agreement exists. So I guess that's our concern, is they're not aware, and might be worth discussing and making sure there's, and not any changes we want to make to this.
And as you can imagine, this is not, well, it depends on the situation, but usually this is not an inexpensive proposition to go out and connect to the main. So it's an expense that the customer was unaware of. All of a sudden they get a letter from us, so they're usually not very happy.
Yeah, and I would add, so there is an agreement. An agreement was made with maybe a previous owner, and it's typically recorded against the property. So when a subsequent owner buys the property, they would have been put on notice, right? When you do your title search and everything, it says, here's all the issues associated with your property. But anybody who's bought a house, you know, you're signing a stack of paper that thick, and oftentimes a new owner wasn't aware that that agreement existed or what the implications were to them. So I think legally we're covered, but, you know, there's a kind of a fairness issue here, and certainly a cost issue to the subsequent property owner.
So when these agreements are written up, is there not an end date to the agreement, the temporary agreement?
I don't believe on these there is. It's not like the other, it's not like the reimbursement one that has usually a 20-year lifespan. This is if at any time in the future, public facilities are made available, like if the district or another developer extends a water or sewer line, typically a water line in front of your property, you have to reconnect your temporary service line to the new service line at your cost,
Whenever that may be.
whenever that may be. Is that right, James?
That's absolutely correct.
And again, there's no district money involved. We don't split the cost. We don't have a program currently that would help them with that.
Okay, thank you for all of that background. So what are you looking for then?
So what I'm looking for from the committee, so we gave you 14 to think about. You may have something on your radar screen that I didn't even bring up. I'm looking for a short list to take forward to the board, and I'm gonna say six-ish. If you can say, hey, of this list of 14 and whatever I came in with in my mind, here's 6 that we, the committee, want staff to take to the board with a recommendation to consider those 6 and pick a list out of that. Maybe it's all 6, maybe it's work on these 3 first and then the next 3 when you get around to it, or, you know, when those 3 are done. So we just want we want to kind of narrow the field from 14 to maybe 6, and we'll take those 6 to the board, and then the board will tell us, work on these, fill in the blank, 3 or 4 or whatever number they want. So that's all we're looking for, is a recommendation. What do you think are your top half dozen, or do you want to give 8, whatever you think is the right number? There's no magic number here, just we want to, 14 would be too much for staff to work on and too much for the board's consideration, I think.
Okay,
And if you're looking for a recommendation, I would say business of the board should definitely be on there. That's an issue that comes up time and time again. I think the reserve policy with all of the financial questions that have been raised in many forums would be a recommendation from me.
So that's where I find myself in an awkward position, because, I mean, I'm looking for your recommendation, not, you know, you're coming to us, look, I mean, they seem all important.
Yep.
I would base them on which ones are most outdated. I mean, none of these have dates on them, so which ones, it sounds like some of them, well, this one's kind of an older, you know, ordinance. So I would base them on which ones are most outdated, have not been updated on an ongoing basis, and then whatever staff recommendations are. I mean, to come to me and ask for recommendations, or which one, I mean, I would ask, which ones do you guys use more on a regular basis? And which ones are most outdated? So that's my recommendation, is to get staff's recommendations on what they use more often, and which
Okay.
ones are most outdated. And so to pick 6 or 7 or 8, I don't know, it's based on what you guys are needing. At least that's my recommendation.
Okay.
I have a slightly different recommendation. what I think would be really helpful is knowing what the numbers are that are associated with these so that I can go in and read them without having to search for them and try to find them. So that would be really helpful.
Yeah, we can do that. We can provide a list of what the resolution or ordinance, maybe even a
Yep.
document with a link to the website that you can.
That would be great, and that would
provide to
also, that would also show, you know, how old they are, when the last time they were updated. You know, I've got a few that I think are, that I would like to see based on, you know, hearing this information now. It sounds like we have a couple of policies that are really surprising to our customers, that often involve thousands of dollars. And they're bad policies. There is no, to my mind, there is no reason why one of our customers should all of a sudden be surprised to have to pay thousands of dollars without, you know, and just sort of say, okay, you owe us thousands of dollars, pay up. I mean, I think that is because either we have not had a mechanism in place to track that process going that direction, or because, you know, for whatever reason, you know, a customer buys a property and didn't know that there was a temporary agreement in place, and now all of a sudden, something completely out of their control, you know, a developer puts in a new line and we're telling them you have to connect. I think that we can improve our reputation as a district by trying to work on some of those. And from what I heard, that is the temporary offsite agreement. That is the water sewer lease capacity. So that's number 14 and number 11. It's number 2, the backflow device upgrades. I think that we need to take a close look at those, because I don't feel like it is fair to say to anyone that uses our water, oh, this happened, therefore now you must pay this, and it's thousands of dollars. It might be the case that that is what has happened, but I think that if we can look at those and try to lessen that, how hard that lands, you know, whether it is, you know, for example, and we can talk, I know we're going to talk about this as a board, but, you know, the backflow device upgrades, perhaps we provide them the opportunity to buy that from us and we charge a small interest, but that way they pay a slightly higher monthly fee, but they don't have to pay, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars up front. And I don't know the legality of that, but I think that, you know, thinking about in terms of some of these policies that land really hard for our customers and are shocking. I imagine several of these, you know, if some of our folks got notices, they would be shocked to learn that this is, you know, something that was beyond their control, but now all of a sudden they're stuck with a bill that's very, very heavy. So I would say those are important to me. You know, the board handbook, orientation handbook, is something that I have been advocating for, so I would like to see that on the list. Business of the board, that has come up several times. I think those would be my priorities. I mean, I know that all of these are important, but you know, other boards have committees that take these in turn and review them, and they do more than 2 or 3 a year. You know, they'll do 20 or 30. So I think that, you know, having a place to start is fair, but I don't think that just updating 2 or 3 policies per year is reasonable. I think we can get through many more than that. But definitely having a place to start. Those would be my recommendations.
And Director Pennick, I'm not sure where we go with I hear your comment and I hear your concern. If you'd like, we could, staff could come back with recommendations. I'd need some time to go sit down with staff and say, okay, we'd have to kind of horse trade amongst ourselves to figure out, okay, which one's really the most important one. 'Cause
Well, even
otherwise-
those that are on now, I mean, you know, with Chris and Wes and James and Elizabeth, those are the ones, I mean, if they know these come up all the time and they're outdated, I mean, it's just, you guys are involved in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
So you know what policies and ordinances are coming up on a regular basis. I don't. I mean, just besides, you know, board meetings. So that's why I would say, which ones do you guys want? Your priorities, and I could put a stamp of approval, and I agree. I mean, I agree with everything with what Director Boyd Hodgson said. based on a good PR move and having good relationships with the district and not hitting somebody with a big fee. So those 4 or 5 that she mentioned are great. But then whatever other recommendations, even with those people that are in this current meeting, would say, yeah, I really come across this bill pay arrangement policy all the time. I'd like to see that. So I'm just, that's all I need. I don't need a full-on, interviews with each and every staff member, but just
Right.
those that are, involved in the day-to-day, and you guys know which ones are outdated more so than I do.
Okay, so would the committee want to see something before we go to the board, or you want us just to put something to go to the board and try to summarize the comments that we've heard here?
I mean, this is a good starting point right now, I think.
Yeah, I guess I'd be inclined to say right now, the backflow devices, the business of the board, the reserve policy, the water sewer lease capacity, maybe the temporary off-site agreement. I don't know about the reimbursement agreement policy, but that's, if we included that, that's already up to 6.
The board handbook.
In the board handbook, I'd be, happy to put that on there too. And Director Boyd Hodgson, I agree with you. We can do more than 2 to 3 per year. I'm just saying, in my evaluation, that's what the comment was, do to 2 to 3 per year. But to me, this is all about prioritization. So anything we could do to work with the committee and the board to figure out where do you want us to start, and then we can go after that. So,
I mean, this
Sure.
is a good
We-
start. You
Yeah, we
got
have to start
6 right
somewhere,
there.
yep.
yeah, okay. So if the committee's okay, I don't know that we need to process any more than that. We'll put together a board item. It won't make the 15th. It'll probably be the first meeting in January where we talk about recommendations for moving forward for policy review. My guess is they're going to kick it right back to all of you, but they're going to say, okay, of this half dozen you brought to us, have them work on this first. And then we'll probably work at the committee level, not at the board level, to actually do the majority of the work.
Okay,
And then,
that's fine.
and then when those are ready for reviewing, we'll take them back to the board and say, okay, you told us to work on these 3, we worked with the committee, and here they are.
Unless other members of the committee that are on have other recommendations, I don't know if they do.
Right, and that may happen at the board meeting. The board may say, hey, did they think about this policy? And if they want to add that, ultimately, the board, 40% of the board is right here, but the board will direct staff, work on these. So whatever helps them reach that decision.
Okay, thank you for all of the legwork on this. It's much appreciated. And, before when this comes to the full board, I would really appreciate in the board packet having these actual policies, ordinances, resolutions included in the board packet.
Copies of them?
Yes,
You mean, yes,
yes.
yeah, we will. And we can provide the committee members with those in advance
Oh,
of the
great,
board packet.
okay,
saying,
that
"Here's
would
those."
be appreciated
We're in
too.
the process of preparing a matrix that shows for each of these 14, where is it? Where's the current one?
Okay,
And
thank you.
I was going to include that for this meeting, but that's a lot of information to go through. I didn't know that it would help this at this time, but going forward, you certainly need that information.
Okay,
And I will say this, oftentimes, we think we have good policies, and then you reach a situation you never expected. It's like, wow, I didn't anticipate that set of circumstances, and this policy just doesn't fit. Doesn't mean it's a bad policy. It means you need to have some flexibility in whatever it is you do. And sometimes, as we mentioned, you realize, oh, this was a good policy, and this was a good policy, but they conflict. So then we have to.
that means it's time to update it.
That's time to update it, right.
Okay, all right, any other discussion or comments? Okay, I think that's the last item. The next meeting date, when is the next meeting date?
Well, we don't know, so we wanted to talk to you about that. So
Okay.
normally, I believe it's the first Monday of the month, but with the first of the year, that'll be January, right around the January 1st, so we may want to consider delaying it a week. And I don't know what travel plans the committee members may have, or critical staff members may have.
Okay, let's see, so the first Monday is January the 3rd. I'm okay moving it to the 10th, if that works for people.
Yeah, I think that would.
Give a little bit of a break.
Yeah. Director
Sounds
Penick,
good.
Does that work?
Okay, so January 10th. And if something is already on a calendar that conflicts with that, we'll let you know, otherwise we'll
Okay,
plan on that date.
okay, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Okay, any other comments or discussions? Anything? No?
Thank you.
Okay.
I guess just one comment from my perspective, we're going to try to transition where there's actually more staff members coming into these meetings, and here I am guilty of not wearing my mask when I'm done talking. But I think meetings are always better when we have less virtual and more in-person from a staff. So you expect probably starting in January, I'll start bringing in more staff members into this. We'll still have the meetings, committee meetings in here, but probably more in-person and less virtual.
Okay, that sounds great. It'll be nice to see everyone. Okay, I think without anything else, I think we are adjourned.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great holiday if I don't see you before then.
Yeah, you too.